What's good, YouTube? This is the Only Big Green Yu-Gi-Oh! Back again with another deck profile. And this deck profile was from a match that me and my friend played that went to Game 3. And that match was the Infernity X-Saber format match. This format happened back in, I believe it was the beginning of 2010. I'm trying to remember the actual month that the ban list happened that created this format. I can't remember though, but it was during the beginning of 2010. It was definitely that time. And a fun fact, this was the format right before Edison, if you guys know what Edison format is. I don't have an Edison format deck built, but I'm definitely working on one right now, so that way I can build it and bring you that deck profile too. And I definitely want to bring some Edison games for you guys once I get Edison. And I'll bring more games of this format too if you want. Anyways, let's get right into the deck profile. This is the Infernity build from this format. You first off run 3 Archfiend. This card is nuts for the reason that whenever you draw him and you have no cards in your hand, you can automatically special summon him, and whenever this card is special summoned, you can add any Infernity card from your deck to your hand. And to clarify for the rest of the video, all Infernity monsters, you must have no cards in your hand to activate and resolve their effects. Next up, you play 3 Necromancer, probably the second best Infernity card other than Archfiend himself. This card is kind of like Summoner Monk, but instead of from the deck, it's from the grave, where whenever he is normal summoned, he switches to defense, and then he can special summon an Infernity monster from your grave. So he pretty much leads to loop with Archfiend and Launcher. He's one of the main cards that you can combo off with in this deck. And he has 2k booty, which is definitely pretty good if you're trying to stall out your opponent. Next up, you run 3 Mirage. Most of the builds that I've seen of this format only run 2 or only run 1. And some people I know don't even like this card at all. But I like 3 because this guy is one of those cards that you top deck him, and if your graveyard is filled full with Infernity monsters, your opponent has lost if they can't stop his summon. He's pretty much a Gotham's Call for Infernities, or Launcher as in a monster, where you can summon him and then tribute him off to special summon 2 Infernity monsters from your graveyard. This card, the only downside about this card is he can't special summon himself because of his effect that doesn't allow him to be special summoned from the grave. And then now on to the tuners for this deck. You run 3 Beetle. Beetle, when you have no cards in your hand, you contribute him to special summon up to 2 Beetles. I like to have 1 Beetle in the grave, 1 Necromancer in the grave, and 1 Infernity Archfiend in the grave, because if so, with that there alone, I can put over 8,000, I believe, 8,200, 8,300 damage, and my opponent loses 3 to 4 cards on his field. If you guys want to see that combo, I can definitely show you that combo off at like the end of one of my matches that I do with this format if I make another video of this. And then, or if you just want me to upload a video of this format with like the combos, the basic combos of this format, I can upload a video of that too. And then next up, the final Infernity card and the final tuner of the deck. You run 1 Infernity Avenger. He's a level 1, and what's good about him is whenever an Infernity monster you control would be destroyed by battle by an opponent's monster, you can send this card to the grave instead and then special summon him, and his level becomes the monster of the monster. So I know this is a lot of reading, so put it simple, if your opponent would destroy Beetle, he goes to the grave, special summons back, and his level becomes Beetle. That's pretty much simple of that card. And then, final monsters of the deck, you run 2 Dark Grafter. He's really good for unbricking your hand, or just not unbricking your hand, just getting cards out of your hand in general. And if you like open up with 2 monsters, a Grafter and an Archfiend or something like that, what I'll normally do is I'll discard Archfiend and send to grave my Necromancer, or if I have Necro in my hand, I'll discard the Necro and then send to grave Archfiend, or if I have like a Beetle, I'll ditch Beetle and send to grave Necromancer or Archfiend. He pretty much just sets up your combos. Love him. Now on to the spells, and for the Infernity spell, and the only Infernity spell, you run Infernity Launcher. This card is at 1 in current format for good reason. It's pretty much Mirage, but with an even better effect, because once per turn you can discard an Infernity. I believe, is it any card or Infernity card? Okay, so it's an Infernity monster. So you can discard an Infernity monster to the grave. So this also can set up your combos. And the fact that it's virtually Zodiac Barrage, where you can just pop it and special summon 2 Infernity monsters, is nuts. And now on to the good old power spells, you could call it, of this deck. The reason why I call them like the power spells of this deck is because these spells can set you up to pretty much just go off for some insane plays. You run this to take an opponent's monster and pretty much just synchro with it. The 1-for-1 to set up plays with your Mirage. The Rhoda to get your Dark Grepher to hand. And then Foolish Burial again to set up plays. And then next up, you run Book of Moons just to interrupt your opponent's plays. Although sometimes it can come in handy for stopping you from taking direct attacks. But most of the time you're using that card to interrupt your opponent. And then next up, not the Power 4, like I like to call them, but definitely pretty good. The reason why I'm not playing Cold Wave in this deck, you guys can see why. It's Infernities. Why would you activate Cold Wave to where you can't set your hand? Be pretty dumb to play Cold Wave, but you do still play the Heavy Storm to pretty much go off and OTK your opponent. Same thing for Giant Tornado to OTK your opponent. And for MST, for if you think your opponent's got something gimmicky going on with a card back there, or they've just been holding on to a card for so long, you can get it out if you're afraid of it. Now on to the Infernity trap cards. The Infernity Inferno, you discard 2 cards from your hand and then send to grave 2 Infernity monsters for the number of cards you discarded from your hand. This is another card that sets up your graveyard for some OTK plays. And then 3 Barrier. This card's self-explanatory. If you played back then when this card was at 3, although I believe it's at 3 now. Yeah, holy crap. I think this card is at 3 now. I might be wrong. But back then when this card came out, this card was nuts. It's virtually a Solemn Judgment if you control no cards in your hand and a face-up Infernity monster. 1 Bottomless Trap Hole, 1 Compulse, again for interrupting your opponent, or if they've summoned something like a Stardust that's very scary, or a Goyo, definitely want to use that to get rid of it. Call of the Haunted, just for bringing back your Archfiend and going off and making launcher plays. Mirror Force, because board wipes wasn't really that much, and Infernity is an OTK-ish deck, and you definitely don't want to lose any of your pieces, and you use this to survive a turn, so that way hopefully you can top deck a launcher next turn. TT, again for the same reason, Mirror Force. Not a lot of board wipes in this format. Now, well, let me rephrase that. They were board wipes, they were just banned at the time. Now on to the final 2 cards, Trap Dust Shoot and Solemn Judgment. Solemn Judgment, self-explanatory. With Solemn Judgment, you're pretty much playing 4 Infernity Barriers. And then Trap Dust Shoot to look into your opponent's hand and get rid of a card. Like if you're playing the mirror match, you kind of might want to side this card out if you guys are playing serious. If you guys are playing fun, then it probably would just be safe to just ditch this card for the Infernity effects. And that's it for the main deck. Now on, you run 1 Magical Android, 1 Ally, and then 1 Sea Dragon. Sea Dragon is what you use to push for OTKs in this deck. This is normally one of the first synchros I make when I go off, or I make a Mistworm and then make him, and then I make a Stardust afterwards. But this card really pushes the game for you. If you can make this card and Mistworm in the same turn, you're going to win that turn most likely. Then you run an Ally of Justice Catastor, because if you're playing something that isn't the mirror match, that's like X-Sabers or Frogs, you pretty much are going to win the game if they can't deal with this card. And Android, because it's one of the only level 5s other than these, and it's still pretty viable, I think, of this format. Now on to the level 6s, I just run a Gaia, I run a Goyo, and then I run a Brio. This extra deck is going to be the same as almost the same as my X-Saber extra deck, because I just really like playing this extra deck. I run 1 Gaia for Stardust Dragon Synchro plays when I can't just sync for level 8 and I can only sync for level 6. I'll have to show you combos with this in a later video. And then I run the Goyo because it's Goyo. You take a monster that you kill. And then, of course, you got to run the Brio because you can just make a brio, discard all the cards in your hand because this was before the errata. And then you can just return things to your opponent's hand to potentially OTK them that turn. Now on to the 7s. I only run one level 7, which is Black Rose, because it's a board wipe. Stardust Dragon for self-explanatory reasons. Thought Ruler for self-explanatory reasons. Colossal cause you can keep bringing him back when he dies, which is nuts. And then the Red Dragon Archfiend for if your opponent's trying to stall you out. And last for the non-Infernity Synchro monsters, you run Mistworm because this guy I make to go into my OTK plays. This is the main guy that I want to make first turn on my opponent or going second. First turn, or going second with this card. And then on to the Infernity cards. I know it's not an Infernity card, but this card's really only seen play in Infernity decks. But Stygian Insurgents, it's virtually Blackluster Soldier in a Synchro card. The 100 Eyes Dragon, he pretty much just copies monsters in the grave. Well, your Infernity monsters in the grave. And he's a 3,000 beater. He gets over Stardust pretty easily. Infernity Doom Dragon, again, it's a card that gets over Stardust pretty easily. And he can out some really annoying cards on your opponent's board. And that's it. I'll be bringing the X-Saber deck real soon. And I'm going to be bringing the Blackwing deck of this format real soon as well. And I might start making duel videos again with this deck. If you want to see a second match of this deck, I've already uploaded a previous match of these two decks heading up against each other. But if you guys want to see more of this stuff, and again, if you guys want to see a combo video of the combos from this format, I can definitely do that for you as well. This has been the Only Big Green Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Johnny, and I'm gone.